Hey neighbors, Kevin here at the etrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Furrion Tankless Water Heater here on our 2021 Forest River Impression fifth wheel trailer. So if you've had a tanked system, you'll know that there is a lot of drawbacks with it in terms of efficiency, the capacity that you have, just overall the looks. You know, when it comes to the controller inside, usually it's that old outdated just little flip switch and maybe a light. With this, you're getting a much more efficient unit. You're going to be getting a lot more hot water, and you're not going to have that huge weight. Now, when you first get to your campsite with a tanked one, you'll have to hook up to your water, wait for the tank to fill, and then heat up. So you have this long process. You're probably going to be waiting at least an hour for that to fill and then heat. Whereas with this system, all we need to do, we hook right up, we'll start running water through it, and then once we go inside and hit on our hot water, we're going to have that instant hot water. I mean, it should only take you a couple seconds just for it to make it from our water heater over to that point of contact at the faucet. So to do the math for you, our old unit was a Suburban, and that was rated at 12,000 BTUs. With our Furrion one, this is going to have a range. So depending on how you set your temperature and set your water pressure, that's going to kind of vary how much that BTU is going to be up or down. So this is going to go from 13,000 BTUs all the way up to 60,000 BTUs at its max capacity. So the math to change that over to our actual output, so with the old one, it was a gas and electric combo, but you could do it separately. So if you're using just the 120 volt service and using that heating element that was in it, that's going to give you about 6 gallons per hour. And the combo of both gas and electric in it was giving you 16 gallons. With our Furrion unit, that's going to give you up to 144 gallons per hour, so that way you don't have to choose between being able to have someone taking a shower and doing the dishes at the same time. You're going to be able to do both and not have to worry that you're going to run out of hot water. So an added benefit with this as well is that it's going to come with a wall thermostat, which will allow you to change your temperature to whatever you want. So say we're going to go down to 111, we'll leave it right there, and as this sets itself, now it's going to start changing our temperature. But since we don't have a tank, you're not going to hear it kicking on right away until a faucet is actually turned on. And then that vortex mixer is going to mix the cold and hot water and send it out so that it's right at that 111 temp. So with this thermostat, you can also change your temperature from Fahrenheit to Celsius and back, and then it's also going to tell you when the flame is kicking on, so when our unit's actually running, that should light up as well. And if you do have any kind of issue with it, this is where you would see your error code pop up. So aside from all the conveniences, this also is packed with a whole lot of safety features. If we open up our door just a bit, there we go, pop that out. You can see in here we have the drain. If I pop out this baffle as well, we have our drain right here, and on the back side we have the vortex chamber, and connected to that is a pressure and temperature safety valve. So if the temperature ever got too high or the pressure was just too high, it's going to automatically kick that water right out here, right through the door, so that way no one's getting burned and there's not going to be a blowout with the vortex chamber. Along with that, there is also protection for the electrical components. We got a fuse right here, which is going to protect us in case there's any kind of electrical shock through the system here. That'll help protect our circuit board, and then all we have to do is just swap out a simple fuse. They've also built in some road shock absorption too, so any vibration you get, because obviously trailers are going to be bumping around as you go down those gravel roads or even just the highway, and we don't want anything in here to get damaged. So all of the electronics have shock absorption in it, so that way nothing's going to come loose. We don't have any contacts breaking off or anything like that, and then we're wondering why our system's not working. So the water heater itself is a standalone option as well, so you don't always have to buy the door, but you will want to, so that way you can actually cover this up. With this being a 16 by 16 already, it was really easy to just swap over to that. I know a lot of the time with some older trailers, it's going to be a much larger unit just because those old tanked ones, especially like a 10 or 12 gallon tank, really had a huge opening here. So we lucked out. We had studs right there to go right in for that 16 by 16 fit, but you might find you need to also kind of shim this in with some wood or maybe another metal stud just so that you can kind of bring that gap in and cover it up. And then that's where there's some other door options for you. So This is a 16 by 16. There's also a 16 by 18 and an 18 by 18 inch door as well. One other very important thing that you're going to want to pick up along with your water heater is a water pressure regulator. If you don't already have one, that's going to help save all of your plumbing in your trailer so that the high water pressure coming from whatever place you hook up to doesn't just blow through and bust all those fittings. And if you didn't have that on there and the water pressure was too high, that's where that safety valve that's going to push water out the drain tube. Let me pull it down and show you. Catching right here. There we go. So back behind the baffle, that's what I was talking about before. That's that drain line. So that pressure and temperature safety valve would kick in because the pressure is too high and we don't want to destroy our water heater. So it's going to just push that right out. So then your water heater is not going to be functioning either. So definitely pick one up. It's not really expensive. You can find them for pretty cheap. And it's just added safety so that you don't have to start pulling up floors and walls to try and figure out where those leaks are coming from. There might be some other things you need to do as well. I find a lot of the time they'll have a piece of trim or something like that, like we have here, that we're going to have to cut through as well. So I just notched it straight down and then moved the screws that they had in this little gasket for the trim piece over, so that way they were held in place nice and tight, and then I caulked over the edge of them, so that way there's no way water to get in there and possibly behind this little lower trim panel here. But aside from that, we weren't able to get the thermostat inside without having to cut through some walls and pull a whole lot of stuff out. So you might find that it's not going to be a super easy install with your trailer, but on some others it might be, you know, a simple swap out. Typically they like to put these near the bathroom, so my goal is usually to get in there and check and see if there's an access panel or something like that I can pop out and easily get back behind here. In our case, with this being a fifth wheel, there's typically going to be that whole water setup, which we have right here, and this is the panel I had to pop out so that I can actually get back and see the backside, undo my connections, and pull it out. So this is going to be a tight and cramped spot anytime you're doing it. There's not really much more I can say about that aside from if you're not wanting to do that yourself, if you don't feel like digging through everything, pulling a whole bunch of panels out and trying to figure out how it's going to fit with your specific setup, then please feel free to use our dealer locator, and you can enter in your zip code and find a shop near you to get it professionally installed. Now, if you are going to do this yourself, please stick around and I'll give you some tips and tricks on how to get it put in. Starting off our install, we're going to need to remove our access door first. And to do so, we're going to pull up on this little lever here, turn it, and have that line up with our hole so we can pop it out. This one, the whole door comes out itself. It's just got little pins holding it, so we'll set that down. And then there's going to be 1, 2, and 3 screws that are going to be mounting the access panel bracket here into our main unit. So we'll remove those. And you typically have some sealant around the outside edge here, but it does not look like they used any from the factory. So it'll make our install a little bit easier, but there was already a gap up here, so there's probably also going to be some water that has leaked into our wall here. But with those screws removed, we can start prying on this. There's probably some butyl tape, hopefully, to help kind of protect the inside, which looks like they only had sealant going around here. Nice crusty anode rod. And this is why we switched to tankless. Now, it looks like there was at one time a second screw over here, but the only thing I'm seeing holding this water heater in place is just this one screw right here, at least. So we will keep investigating, see if we can start pulling this out a bit. Yep, one screw. All right, we're kind of pinching in the back. Now's a good time to go inside and just double check. There's probably, with where this is sitting, this looks like it's our bathroom. So this is most likely under the shower. And typically under your shower, you're gonna have an access panel so you can get to your plumbing. That's probably gonna be our way that we get into here. And if not, then the panel next to us is our water hookup. We'll probably have to pop this out so that way we can get in there. All right, so we're inside now. We can see now there isn't a base here with an access panel, so all the plumbing is going to have to be accessed by that panel that is outside. So we'll take that out and show you how we get to it. All right, so it looks like someone's already even been in here too, because some of the screws are already loose, but we just have screws holding this panel in place, and you can kind of even reach up over here and you can see that there's some wiring and stuff running behind here. So we'll have to pop this panel out, that way we can get access to all of our connections. This one's all chewed up. There we go. All right, so there are all of our connections. So right now the lip of our opening here is catching on the styrofoam. It's really giving me a hard time trying to pull this out. I have reached in there and disconnected the hot water hookup just because this has already been winterized, so I don't have to worry about any water leaking out inside of the wall here. But this is probably going to be a fight. The styrofoam is real thick on there, so the whole way here we're going to be trying to really yank this out and just taking our time working it out. Now that we have a better idea of what we got going on, since I've pulled it a little bit more forward and I've seen back behind there, there's going to be a few things we're going to need to disconnect first. So one of them being power. Since this one runs off 120, we want to make sure that we are not hooked up to shore power anymore. So we'll disconnect that. The gas is already off. I went over to the oven and I just ran the stove a little bit just to make sure there's no more gas in the line. And I've loosened this up here. So typically on these newer models you'll have the gas connection at the back, but on some of the older ones you'll see it up at the front here where the igniter is. So we'll loosen that up, and then that should be enough to get us out of here. Now the little computer that they have stuck on top, which I can show you once we get it out, is just kind of pressed into the styrofoam. You can lift it up, and I threw it towards the back so that way it's not going to get jammed up when I go to pull this out. All right, gas connection is out. Now I'm gonna have to fight the styrofoam again. Make sure you take your time. There might still be more connections you need to disconnect off of here first. So it looks like this is our 120 volt, so that is running up, and it looks like it's hidden into something over here. So there's probably an outlet hidden behind this stud that we're going to need to get to. Because typically when you have that on there, we'll have a normal plug on it, so we can just disconnect real easy. So like I said, there was an outlet hidden on the other side of that stud, so I was able to pull it out, and we can keep working our way out here. Just take your time. Like I said, there's going to be a bunch of connections you'll find that you'll need to take off before you can fully pull this out. And I got one other one right here I think I might need to grab first. This is all our DC wiring. All right, so looks like we are going to need a wrench to disconnect our cold water inlet. All right, so off camera, I had to have Tom here give me an extra hand to hold this, and we've got our cold water inlet out. And here's our DC wiring. We have red, that's most likely going to be our power. Blue will probably be our communication wire, which is probably running to the panel that is right when you walk in. There's one with a little switch that has on-off for the water heater, so that's probably telling it when it can and can't kick on. If not, it might be the red, so we will need to trace that back. Green, most likely going to be our ground though. So here's that other box I was talking about. This is typically double-sided taped right to the top here. So when you are pulling this out, you will want to reach back, grab this, throw it off to the back. That way you can minimize your profile here and be able to pull it out of the hole. So instead of the blue being a communication wire like I thought, this has a very old style switch where it's going to be two little switches right next to each other. One is going to be your on-off, the other one is for a light. which you can see in the wire diagram right here. So the blue wire we're just going to end up capping off and not using. The red wire runs over to our switch, which is inside the trailer, and then our green one is coming right down here and going to ground. So to give you a brief overview of the unit before we get it in place, and it's too hard to see, we're going to have some caps on here for our water inlet, and that's going to be our cold water coming in, and we've got a cap over here with red, and that's going to be our hot water coming out. Now on the other side of this is our pressure safety valve. So anytime that the water gets too hot and reaches over this set temperature, or if it is putting too much pressure, we got way too much water pressure, it's going to start kicking that water out, and it's going to come down this drain tube right here and run out to the outside. So we've got this here, it's going to pool up in this and then just leak right out the door, and that is your, essentially just your safety setup here, so that way the water isn't leaking inside the wall of the trailer. Now there are a couple other things here on the front side. So on some units you'll typically have a on-off switch. So this is the main power switch for the unit. There used to be a glass fuse, and instead they've switched over to just a standard fuse. So you can pop that fuse holder open, replace that if you ever do have an issue. Back over on this side though, a couple other things that you need to pay attention to. This right here is your water pressure. So right now it's all the way up at the max. If we needed to turn that down, say you're in a higher altitude and your unit's not going to be as effective just because we are burning gas to heat it up, then you would just turn back the gauge a little bit, which this is a little stiff. There we go. You just turn that back and you can adjust the water pressure back, then it'll be more efficient. It'll heat up that water better. Now you will have less water pressure though, so that is the drawback there. Below that is a little clean out. So you need a pretty fat screwdriver, or in my case, I just used a trim panel tool to open it up. So this needs to be cleaned out periodically. And it's just hand tightened. So as we unscrew this, we'll see a little mesh filter. Right there. Every once in a while, just pull that out, spray it out, make sure it's nice and clean. That'll prevent any blockages that could end up messing with your water heater and then lowering the efficiency. And then once you want to put it right back, there's a paint line from the factory for how tight it needs to be. So that's hand tight right there. So that's good to go again. And then below that, this is our drain plug. This guy, you shouldn't be using any tools on. Should be hand tight. There we go. And if you were winterizing and blowing out your unit, this is where you would need to pull the plug, and this will allow all the water to drain out. So the other half of our install here is going to be actually mounting up and wiring up our thermostat, and unfortunately there isn't a good way for us to get into any of the walls inside of here. So this isn't going to be as clean of a install, because I typically want to have this right when you walk in or in the kitchen area somewhere, but unfortunately they've walled everything off to a point where I can't really access anything. So our next option would be in one of these cubby holes. Now there is space over here on this panel, but with all of our water hookups right here, something's going to splash over here and potentially get on this. And with the back of it being open to the circuit board, I really wouldn't want to have any water accidentally get in there. So I think what we'll do is we'll run our wire up over, because there is some space here between the top of this panel and then the actual roof here. And we'll run this over to right here and mount it up, so that way it's out of the way of everything else. It's not going to affect our storage situation in here, and we'll still be able to set our thermostat. We just won't be able to turn it on and off or change it once we're inside the camper. We'll have to come back out, open the door up, and do it that way. So one other thing that we're also going to need is a braided hose, just to give you a little perspective here. Where our hookups are going to be different between our two models. So on the old one, it was down here right in the center for the cold. Hot was up top. Now we have it moved over a few inches. This one's kind of down and a little bit over to the right. So with that being PEX and it's already formed to that spot, I don't really want to bend it too hard and have it, potentially break or get a little kink in it. So switching over to some braided hoses will make it a lot easier for us. We just want to make sure that we're getting the correct fitting size. So on the water heater itself, it's going to be a 1/2 inch, and we just got a swivel fitting on there so we can easily get that on. And then on the other side, it's going to be another 1/2 inch, but that could vary depending on what your setup is. So you will want to check what kind of connection point you have on your trailer first, and then come over and get your correct hose. If you look for these are typically going to be in the faucet area. So when it comes to the plumbing on an RV, it's typically a little bit smaller than what you'd find in your house. So like when I was doing a toilet, I had to go get another hose too. And instead of going in the toilet section, it was in the faucet section instead. So little tip there for you. All right, so for these communication wires, they recommend 16 gauge as your minimum. We're gonna go a little bit over that just because this is the scrap wire I have laying around. And I have these two with a bit of length on the back side, so that way I can make my connections here and still have a little bit of room. That way if we ever had to pull the water heater out for any reason, we still can do so without being too tight with the wire. Now on the stud that's running along here, I'm going to be putting these on, and what these are little double-sided tape with a zip tie holder, and that's going to allow us to hold up our wire out of the way so it's not draping down at all without having to run a screw into the stud. So this makes it a little bit easier. I've already ran a couple of them. I got one more I need to put on, and then we can zip tie up our wiring and mount up our thermostat. Now on the thermostat, typically you would drill through the wall and then have your wiring behind it, but in this case we don't want to do that because right behind here is our propane. So what I did was I wanted to shim it out just a bit so that way my wires aren't getting crushed once they are on the base and the base is screwed in. So to give you an idea here, here's the case with it on. So I just screwed that shim on, and then that'll allow enough room for our wires to sit, and with how high up it's sitting, you're not really going to notice that it's kind of angled out. So we shouldn't have an issue there. I'm going to use some multi-purpose screws to shoot right through here and secure it to the wall, and we'll get it all wired up. There we go. Now we can test with our wiring. I'll sneak that through. There we go. So that's on there, tight enough that we don't have to worry about it. It's not going to wiggle off or anything like that. We have our wiring up, and now we can just trace over the wire and zip tie it with those holders that we have. All right, I've got my wire traced over. I put the zip ties on, but I have them real loose still, so that way I can pull all my slack back into the area where our water heater is, so it's not hanging down here. I think I'm gonna crimp onto our thermostat first. Now we don't want these to end up ever touching each other, so we want to make sure that we don't ever connect power until these are already ready and separated over at the unit itself. It'll definitely blow out the circuit board on your thermostat, and it could potentially damage your water heater as well. So this is such a little stupid thing to end up costing you some big money in the long run, so make sure that you have it separated nice. But as far as which wire on here goes to which wire on the water heater, it does not matter. They just both have to be connected separately. I'm using heat shrink. Honestly, you'd probably be fine with just a regular butt connector in this area, but since there is water right here, I'm gonna go ahead and just heat shrink those down as well. Now that we have everything figured out, I'm gonna start making my connections. So starting out with my water line, get this tightened on, and now, depending on what type of fitting you have, you might need to use some thread sealant. The one we are using right now does not require thread sealant because there is a gasket inside of the fitting. So we would not want to use it in this case. And we aren't going to use any on the water heater itself as well. All right, nice and tight. ties on there nice and tight too. Now we can start making our connections. I am using this table to help hold this up so that way we can do it all out here so you guys can see it at home. And like I said, we won't be using any thread tape on the connection to our water heater. So you want to make sure that you are using the correct fitting. I'm going to hand tighten these on. I'll come back with my pliers as well. I'll have to move a tiny bit closer for this one. Now when you're doing this, we just want to make sure we're tightening it down. We don't want to over tighten it. It's really easy to do that, and what will happen is you'll rip the entire fitting here that's inside of our water heater, and it'll start to twist that as well. We don't want that to happen. So just go just until it's really snugged down. So right about there. Be a little bit harder to do on the water heat or hot side to rip it out, but we don't want to damage that. So we're good right there. Now we can start making electrical connections. So we still have our 3 wires, power, ground. This one was running to a light. So on the original switch that would come with the old Suburban heater, it has a wire running to a light, and like a little indicator light, and then it also has another one running for power, which I can show you once we're inside the camper as well. And that's this guy right here. So we have our power center sending power out from the DC distribution panel to a switch that I'll show you, and then that runs over here to our water heater with this red line. So looking at our wires, we've got 2 blue and a white and a black. The black is going to be our power, white is going to be our ground, 2 blues are going to be our communication wires. And I want to try and have these sit real low so that they're away from this area, because this is the vortex chamber right here, and this is where it's going to heat up and spin and mix that water. So we'll have our hot water and our cold water coming in here. So if any of this stuff is going to get hot, I want to avoid it completely with my wiring. I am going to use heat shrink again, just because if there's ever the chance of any kind of water leak, we don't want to end up frying our water heater as well. But you could get away with just a normal butt connector. Most cases, the manufacturer is just going to use a wire nut or a Wago connector like they did on this one anyway. So we've got our power to our power at the unit. Ground to ground. And our last connection here is going to be our communication wires. And like I said before, this does not matter which one goes to which, just don't let them touch. And right now, as we're doing this, we also have the battery disconnected so that we have no power potentially even coming through, even though it is switched. I just didn't even want to take the chance. Make sure you give each of these a little tug, make sure that it's nice and secure in that butt connector. Don't want to run the risk of, once we slide it in, or maybe if we're going down the road and it's bumpy, to have that come loose on us. All right, now that all that's done, I'm going to come back with my heat gun and just shrink those down. All right, last connection we can make is our gas line. So we will thread that on, and this is another instance where there's not going to be thread sealant just because of the type of fitting that we're using. So another thing we're going to do before we slap this into place is to put some butyl tape on the back side of our flange. And what this butyl tape does is it gives us a seal between the mounting flange here and our trailer. And when we shoot in our screws, it starts to wrap itself around the threads in the screws, so that way we don't have water leaking in through the screws as well. So we really want that extra protection. And I've just kind of cut these down to match up the flange length, just to make it easier, because this is going to come in a giant roll. And once you have it how you want it, just peel off the backing, and we'll be ready to put it into place. All All right, we're a little snug with a couple of screws here, but we can probably wedge it through. All right, now we're a little bit better. I got it past most of those screws. We've got one little part we're pinching on here still, but we're almost there. There we go. Press that on. Now on the back side here, I'm going to come in with just a little block. They used to have this big one here, but this is too tall for our new unit. So this was what was supporting the tank on our old one. I'm going to probably just rip off one of these pieces because we only probably need about an inch, maybe a little bit over to support the bottom of our unit here. But that is going to be a case-by-case thing. I'll just slip it in. I might even kind of pull out a little bit with our unit so I can screw it down just so we don't have it getting loose and maybe falling back more into the cabinet here. All right, now I have my brace in place at the back and I've got that screwed down so it's nice and secure. We're going to be reusing the hardware that they give you, or what that was with the old water heater, I should say. We're tapping into some metal studs here, and these self-tappers are honestly in still pretty good shape. So we will reuse them. We're gonna have to drill new holes though. Now that I have that mounted up and snug down, we are actually gonna have to still back those screws back out for part of our mounting flange here for our door, but I didn't want that moving at all because we are gonna have to cut out a little bit of this trim piece right here, so that way our door can actually sit flat. So if we line that up with our unit, you can also see right here, here's where all that water would come out. So it's not like it's going to get trapped by the door. It'll be able to come right over this lip and then pour out between the door and the mounting flange. So the best way here is going to be marking this. So I'm just going to take my razor blade and we'll make a little line here on the trim. And now you can see what all we have to cut out here. Now this has probably got a metal track behind it, or they just stuck the rubber gasket up here and just screwed into it. So we'll have to cut into it to actually see. Originally I was gonna curve this so that it would look pretty nice and still be able to have that little bit of trim there, but unfortunately that trim, the way it's on this track, isn't gonna hold itself up anymore. So instead we're just gonna notch it straight down. I'll steal 2 of these screws and I'll shoot one in here and here, because we're also gonna have to remove this track right here that mounts up this little plate here to our wall. All right, now that we have this completely cut out and I have put in my 2 screws to help hold up that gasket right there, double check. We've got plenty of room. When I come by with the sealant all around the sides, I'll also just throw a little bit on there. I know they didn't do it on every side, but if we can keep this looking nice and prevent any water from getting in here and then back behind the wall, that'd be worth it. So now that I have all that figured out, we're going to pop each of these screws back out and we're going to run them through with our access door in place as well. The next part's going to be, we'll take this gasket off of our exhaust and we will pop this into place in our door. Then we're going to have 2 little prongs that we're going to stick onto on the bottom. We'll push that up. Make sure we're making a good connection with our exhaust here. And now we have our door on. I'm going to test all of our water connections and make sure we don't have any leaks. And to do so, I'm going to put a paper towel under our fittings in there, because sometimes it could be a really, really slow leak and you might not really know it. But if you have a paper towel, you usually see those wet spots on there, or if you're letting this sit overnight or something like that, that's where you really see those wet spots maybe dry up on your paper towel. So we will shove this in here under those connections and make sure that we're all good. All right, so we have now filled up our tank. We've turned on our gas. If you look back behind all of the equipment here, there's 10 little holes, and that's where your flame is going to be from the igniter. And you want to make sure that that's a nice blue flame. Otherwise, you might have a little bit of a gas issue. Maybe it's not getting enough, or maybe it's just not getting enough oxygen so that it's making that right combination. So with all that said, I'll go turn on a hot water faucet, and then we can test out our water heater. All right, so to give you an idea, we have a infrared thermometer. Honestly, a probe tester would be a little bit better since we are using this on water, but it is what we have for today. So this is going to read the surface temperature. I'm going to use this to show you what our water is coming out at. We have it set for 120 on the thermostat. So I'm getting 115, 116. So we're pretty much there, and you can kind of maybe see it through the camera. I can't tell, but there's some steam kind of coming up from here too. But I hit 119 and then came back. It's probably catching my hand, but it was at 118 for a second there. Like I said, this isn't the best tester to really show it, but just to give you an idea, we are getting up to that temp really quickly, and it's passing right through, just through those the plumbing that comes through the floor. Now, if you're expecting it to immediately kick right into hot, it's not going to, just because you do have to get that pressure through. So depending on a few other factors, so if it's cold outside, obviously if you don't have enough insulation for those, typically, especially with all new trailers, it's probably going to be PEX. So there isn't really any insulation around that unless the manufacturer really wanted to go above and beyond. So you could run into a few issues where you might need to turn the temperature up a little bit more, just because by the time it gets over that point of contact, it's just not, it's cooling down in the line as it comes through. So if you're really wanting to get it to that one specific temperature, you might need to kind of play around with some things. So now that we've checked everything, we don't have any leaks behind our unit, and we know we've got hot water coming in at each one of our faucets and our shower. The last part of our install is going to be sealing up around our edge here, so that way no water can get in back behind here. And we're going to be using some non-sag sealant, which you can also pick up here at etrailer. And we're just going to go right around. I think I'll start over here. Well, I think that'll do it for today's look at and installation of the Furrion Tankless Water Heater here on our 2021 Forest River Impression fifth wheel trailer. My name's Kevin. And if you still have some questions about which water heater is going to be the right fit for your trailer, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department. We'd be happy to help you out on your journey.